Dawn cracks over a Luftwaffe dispersal in occupied France. The air is so cold it bites. A mechanic's gloved hands skate across the frozen cowling of a Messerschmitt 109, his breath a white cloud in the thin light. Near the fire barrel, a group of pilots trade jokes, the laughter sharp and brittle. The topic is the new American fighter. The British seem so fond of the P-51 Mustang. A veteran ace, his Knight's Cross a stark silhouette against his leather jacket, scoffs into his steaming mug. Mustang? It's a reconnaissance pony. A fine toy for strafing trains, maybe. But up there, he gestures with his thumb toward the high thin blue where the real fighting is done. It's nothing. Let the Tommies have their ponies. We hunt wolves. His comrades chuckle, sharing his confidence. The Mustang was known, but not feared. Not yet. This casual arrogance, this dismissal of an untested opponent, was a seed planted in frozen ground, about to blossom into a terrifying reckoning. To understand how that reckoning came, we have to rewind to 1940. Britain stood alone, desperate for modern fighters. They approached North American Aviation, an American company known more for trainers than frontline combat planes, and asked them to build Curtiss P-40s under license. But North American had a better idea. In an astonishing display of engineering prowess, they promised a brand new superior fighter, from blueprint to prototype, in just 120 days. They delivered. The result was the NA-73X, the aircraft that would become the P-51 Mustang. These early models, powered by an American Allison V1710 engine, were brilliant down low. Their revolutionary laminar-flow wing design sliced through the thick air below 15,000 feet, making them fast and agile. British pilots loved them for tactical reconnaissance and ground attack missions over France. But climb any higher, and the Allison engine gasped for air. Its performance plummeted catastrophically above 20,000 feet, right in the heart of the German interceptors' hunting grounds. For the elite Luftwaffe pilots in their high-altitude Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts, the Allison-powered Mustang was indeed little more than a recon pony, a nuisance. Not a threat to their dominance of the skies over the Reich. This critical flaw might have condemned the Mustang to a footnote in aviation history had it not been for a devastating crisis unfolding in the skies over Germany. By 1943, the American 8th Air Force was committed to a high-stakes, high-risk strategy, precision daylight bombing of Germany's industrial heartland. The theory was sound destroy the enemy's ability to wage war. But the reality was a nightmare. UN-escorted B-17 and B-24 bombers were being slaughtered. The Schweinfurt Regensburg mission saw 60 heavy bombers shot down. The infamous Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt in October 1943 cost another 60 bombers and their crews a loss rate that was utterly unsustainable. The brutal arithmetic was clear. Without a fighter that could fly all the way to Berlin and back one that could protect the bombers, deep inside enemy territory, the daylight bombing campaign would fail and thousands more airmen would be lost. America needed a long-range escort. It needed a guardian angel. The answer came not from an American design bureau, but from a spark of British ingenuity. At the Rolls-Royce facility in Hucknall, a test pilot named Ronnie Harker watched a Mustang perform and saw past the wheezing Allison engine. He saw the potential locked within its advanced airframe. A memo was fired off. Simple and world-changing. He believed that fitting their own legendary Merlin 61 engine, the same power plant that gave the Spitfire its incredible high-altitude performance into the Mustang would create a machine capable of anything. It was a bold gamble. British engineers, in a moment of inspired improvisation, literally bolted a Merlin into a Mustang airframe. The results were electrifying. The Mustang was reborn. With the Merlin's two-stage supercharger, it could now breathe in the thin, frigid air of high altitude. It was no longer just fast down low. It was a screamer at 30,000 feet, faster than any German fighter in service. Harker himself wrote with breathless excitement. The aircraft had a personality of its own. It was at this point that we really knew that we had a winner. This wasn't just an improvement. It was a revelation. A war-changing secret that the Luftwaffe, comfortable in their high-altitude sanctuary, had not yet discovered. And so, as winter gives way to the spring of 1944, a new sight appears in the sky. High above the Dutch coast, silver contrails etch their way east, arcing inexorably toward the heart of Germany. Inside the cockpits are American pilots, flying the new Merlin-powered P-51 B and C models. They are flying farther than any escort has gone before. Back at that French aerodrome, the joke about the recon pony still hangs in the morning air. It's about to turn sour. The hunt was on, but the roles of hunter and hunted were about to be violently reversed. Late 1943. Above the clouds at 25,000 feet, the air war over Germany was about to change forever. For the Luftwaffe pilots rising to meet the American bomber streams, the routine was grim but familiar. Intercept, attack, disengage, and return to base. But today something was different. A German Staffelkapitän, a seasoned ace in his FW-190, scans the bomber formation approaching Bremen. He sees the usual specs of the escort fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolts, heavy and predictable. But then he spots another silhouette. Slender, almost elegant, lurking far deeper over the Reich than any escort had a right to be. He squints. It's an American fighter, but not one he recognizes from the intelligence briefings. He dismisses it, banking his squadron in for a high-side pass on the B-17s. That was his first mistake. As his cannons start to roar, a flash of silver erupts from below. The strange fighter isn't just keeping pace, it's climbing. Climbing with an impossible, knife-like verticality he's never seen from an Allied plane. Before he can react, the slender shape is on his tail. The German pilot jams his stick forward, diving away, a maneuver that had saved him a dozen times before. But this time the shadow stays with him. The eerie steadiness of the pursuer is unnerving. This wasn't a P-47 or a Spitfire. This was something new. This was the P-51B Mustang. The secret wasn't just its sleek airframe. The magic was under the hood. American ingenuity had met British genius, creating the Packard-built V1650, a licensed version of the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This supercharged V12 powerhouse transformed the Mustang from a decent low-altitude fighter into a high-altitude world-beater. Paired with its revolutionary laminar-flow wing, which dramatically reduced drag, the Mustang was suddenly the fastest thing in the sky above 20,000 feet. It was a perfect marriage of aerodynamic grace and raw power. But speed and altitude were only part of the equation. The final piece of the puzzle was a simple, almost crude innovation: the drop tank. These external fuel tanks, made of paper or aluminum, were the alchemical key that unlocked the map of Europe. Suddenly, American escorts weren't limited to the coast. They could fly to Bremen, Emden, and beyond, all the way to the heart of Germany and back. The bomber crews, accustomed to fighting alone deep in enemy territory, started seeing these silver angels staying with them, a welcome sight that brought both relief and wonder. For the first time, the little friends could go the distance. Initially, German intelligence misread the signs. The early reports were scattered, dismissed as isolated encounters. The intel sheets listed the Mustang as just another American type, failing to grasp its game-changing potential. But the pilots in the sky knew better. The whispers in the ready rooms began to change. The mockery that once greeted the early Allison-engine Mustangs turned into grim warnings. They spoke of a new escort that refused to break off, a fighter that would meet them in the climb and outrun them in the dive. The feeling of invincibility over their own homeland began to crack. Simultaneously, a seismic shift was occurring in American strategy. The old doctrine of tying escorts tightly to the bomber boxes was being challenged. Visionary commanders realized that the best defense was a good offense. Instead of just warding off attacks, the escorts were being unleashed. Their new mission: seek and destroy the Luftwaffe wherever it could be found. This was the prelude to the Doolittle Revolution, a strategy that would turn the hunters into the hunted. The Mustangs were no longer just bodyguards. They were becoming assassins. Imagine the cockpit experience. The bite of the oxygen mask on your face, the cold seeping through your flight suit. You're scanning the sky, eyes straining against the glare, when you spot the bandits. You push the throttle forward, feeling the heavy shove into your seat as the Merlin engine screams. The world tilts as you roll into a dive, the G-force pushing you down, but your focus is absolute. You watch the Focke-Wulf ahead, and your Mustang feels like an extension of your own body, steady, precise, and deadly. You're not just protecting bombers anymore. You're taking the fight to them. December 1943, a raid returns from the German interior. But this time, the fight doesn't end when the bombers cross back over friendly lines. The Mustangs are relentless. They chase the German fighters all the way back toward their own airfields, strafing them as they try to land. The message was clear and terrifying for the Luftwaffe. The sky over Germany was no longer a sanctuary. The rules had changed, and the war was coming home. The era of the Mustang had truly begun, and the Reich's aerial fortress was about to crumble. The new year, 1944, brings a new commander and a new, terrifying doctrine to the mighty 8th Air Force. General Jimmy Doolittle, a name already etched into legend, takes the reins and unleashes his fighters. The old rules, the tether that bound them to the bombers, are cut. The order is simple, revolutionary, and utterly ruthless. Go hunt. For the American pilots, the bombers are still our boys, but the mission has changed. They are no longer just bodyguards. They are predators, ranging far ahead of the bomber streams, clearing the skies with a terrifying new efficiency. For the Luftwaffe defenders, this is a doctrinal shock. The sky, their sky, is no longer empty when they climb to intercept. It's already occupied. The hunters are waiting. They find themselves ambushed before the main event even begins. This strategic shift culminates in the brutal crescendo of late February. Big Week, a relentless, week-long assault on the German aircraft industry. But it's more than just bombs on factories. It's the North American P-51 Mustang, unleashed. Sleek, powerful, and with the legs to go all the way to Berlin and back. The Mustang becomes the kestrel in the Falcon's domain. They slash through formations of interceptors, dive with impunity to strafe airfields, and weave a deadly shield around the bomber streams. The leash is off, and the wolves are loose. The impact is immediate and devastating. Even the highest echelons of the Luftwaffe are forced to confront the chilling reality. The legendary ace Adolf Galland, upon seeing a P-51 over German airspace, reportedly stated, "I knew the war was lost." He and other senior officers recognized the Mustang's all-around supremacy. It could outclimb, outdive, and outturn their best fighters at high altitude. The technological edge Germany had once enjoyed was gone, replaced by a silver-winged specter that haunted the high frontier. But this supremacy comes at a staggering human cost, particularly for the Germans. The Luftwaffe is forced to throw young, undertrained pilots into the inferno of the Reichsverteidigung, the defense of the Reich. Fuel is rationed, training hours are slashed, and the odds of survival plummet with every mission. Let's imagine one such pilot. We'll call him Klaus. His hands tremble on the stick before takeoff, a cold sweat beading on his brow. He remembers the early days, the jokes about the fat ladies lumbering across the channel. The memory now sounds hollow, a ghost of a forgotten confidence. Today, there are no jokes. As his swarm of 4 Messerschmitts claws for altitude, the radio crackles with warnings, but it's too late. Out of the sun, they come. Mustangs. They execute flawless high-side attacks, their .50 calibers tearing through the thin skin of his wingman's plane. It blossoms into a brief, violent flower of orange and black. Klaus yanks his plane into a defensive spiral, but another Mustang is on him, effortlessly matching his every move, trapping him in a rolling scissors maneuver he can't escape. He sees the flashes on their wings, feels the impact slam into his fuselage. He's no longer a hunter, he's prey. He watches as his squadron is torn apart, scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Then comes March 4th, 1944, a moment that shatters a myth. For the first time, American fighters appear in the skies over Berlin in broad daylight. The capital, the heart of the Reich, once considered an inviolable sanctuary, is no longer a symbolic boundary. It's just another target on the map. The psychological break is profound. If the little friends, as the grateful bomber crews have nicknamed their escorts, can reach Berlin, where can't they go? The fear is palpable. In the static-laced chaos of the German radio channels, a new tone emerges. The clipped, confident commands of aces are replaced by strained, panicked calls for help, calls that are often cut short. It is the sound of a defender learning the true meaning of fear. A fear delivered at 30,000 feet by the Silver Angels of the 8th Air Force. The year is 1944. The air over Europe is a pressure cooker, and the lid is about to blow. For the pilots of the 8th Air Force, a new shape appeared on the flight lines. It was still a Mustang, but sharper, deadlier. The P-51D, gone was the high-backed fuselage, replaced by a teardrop bubble canopy offering a god's-eye view of the sky. 6 .50 caliber machine guns were now standard, a hornet's nest of firepower. But these weren't just technical upgrades. They were tools for a new, more brutal phase of the war. The Luftwaffe knew it was being bled white. Desperation breeds ferocity. They stopped finessing the fight and started throwing haymakers. Bomber crews watched in horror as German fighters abandoned classic maneuvers for suicidal head-on passes. Cannons blazing, flying straight through the formations. Specialized units, the Sturmgruppen, appeared in heavily armored Focke-Wulf 190s, designed to get close and pulverize a B-17 at any cost. They would mass their remaining fighters for one huge, all-or-nothing interception, hoping to overwhelm the escorts through sheer numbers. But every time it seemed, the Mustangs were already there, waiting above them, glinting in the sun like sharks sensing blood. Down below, the war effort was strangling itself. Following the Normandy landings, Allied fighters, especially the Mustangs, became masters of the low-level domain. They executed the transportation plan with ruthless efficiency, strafing anything that moved on rails or roads. Locomotives exploded in clouds of steam, fuel trucks burned in greasy black columns, and supply depots vanished overnight. This wasn't just about destroying materiel. It was about severing the arteries of the German war machine. Back at Luftwaffe training bases, the impact was catastrophic. There was no fuel for young pilots, no spare parts for their worn-out trainers. The wellspring of new aviators was drying to a trickle. Then a ghost appeared in the sky. A shape that moved with impossible speed, leaving the fastest props standing still. The Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter. For a moment, it seemed like the miracle weapon that could turn the tide. A bomber gunner would see it coming, a silver dart screaming past his window, too fast to even track. But the jet had a fatal weakness. It was a fuel-guzzling beast and most vulnerable during its long, slow landing approach. So the Mustangs adapted. They became patient predators, loitering high above German airfields, ignoring the flak puffs bursting around them. They'd watch the jets return, thirsty and slow, then dive from the heavens. The first warning the German pilot had was the terrifying rip of 6. 50s tearing his wings to shreds as his wheels touched the runway. For a German pilot still flying, the world was shrinking. His squadron was a collection of ghosts. Every morning, more empty bunks. The fuel his mechanics pumped into his Messerschmitt was thin, impure. His engine would cough and sputter on takeoff, a constant reminder of the Reich's decay. He no longer scanned the sky for a worthy dogfight. He scanned it for the inevitable glint of silver wings on the horizon, knowing they were always out there, waiting. The feeling wasn't just of being hunted. It was of being erased. New Year's Day, 1945. The Luftwaffe made its final cataclysmic gamble, Operation Bodenplatte. In a stunning surprise attack, hundreds of German fighters roared at treetop level across the frost-covered fields of France and Belgium, striking Allied air bases at dawn. For a few brief chaotic hours, it was a maelstrom of burning planes and exploding ammo dumps. It was ferocious, it was brave, and it was strategically suicidal. They destroyed hundreds of Allied aircraft on the ground, but they lost their last irreplaceable veteran pilots in the process. Shot down by anti-aircraft fire or by the few Allied fighters who managed to get airborne. It was the last twitch of a dying giant. Now, the silence is what's most terrifying. The air is cold and heavy with unspoken dread. The sky over Germany is a vast gray sheet. But slowly, the overcast begins to break. Patches of blue appear, and with them, the telltale white lines, contrails. Hundreds of them, seething the upper atmosphere, stretching from one horizon to the other. Down on the airfield, a lone German mechanic looks up, his breath misting in the frigid air. The silence deepens, taut and expectant, the heavy quiet just before the scramble bell rings for the last time. By early 1945, the skies over Germany had become a deadly hunting ground. Not for the Luftwaffe, but for the Allied fighters that now roamed with terrifying freedom. The P-51 Mustang, once a distant promise, was now the reality. Squadrons of them, silver sharks glinting in the high-altitude sun, escorted B-17s and B-24s to the very heart of the Reich. And when the bombers turned for home, the Mustangs were let off the leash. They became free hunters, descending from the heavens to strafe anything that moved. Trains, supply trucks, and most of all, the Luftwaffe airfields themselves. The hunter had become the hunted. Imagine you're a young German pilot, maybe flying a Bf-109, your fuel is rationed. Your replacement parts are scarce, and your experienced comrades are dwindling. You scramble to intercept a bomber formation, climbing desperately to meet them. But before you even see the fat friends, you see the little friends. A glint of sunlight off a canopy, high above you. then another and another. They're already there, waiting. It's a feeling of utter helplessness, a strategic checkmate played out at 30,000 feet. Let's put ourselves in that cockpit for one final decisive encounter. Hans, a veteran of 100 missions, pushes his throttle forward. His engine sputters, a reminder of the low-quality fuel. Below, the bomber stream is a silver river, but his eyes are fixed on the specks diving from above. Mustangs. He picks one out, turning head-on, a desperate gamble favored by the heavily armed German fighters. The distance closes in a blur. He sees the 6 winking lights of the Mustang's machine guns. His own cannons are ready. 1,000 yards. 500. His thumb tenses on the firing button. But the Mustang pilot doesn't flinch. He holds his fire, a display of terrifying discipline. At the last possible second, Hans breaks away, the Mustang flashing past his canopy with a roar that shakes his entire airframe. He's exposed. Before he can regain his bearings, 2 more Mustangs are on him. They don't make the mistake of turning with his 109, a fight he might win at lower speeds. Instead, they use their superior energy retention, executing a perfect boom and zoom. One dives, fires a burst, and uses its speed to climb back to altitude. As Hans evades, the second Mustang is already diving. It's a relentless, coordinated assault. His radio is a chaotic mess of static and panicked shouts. The seamless teamwork of the Allied pilots is a weapon in itself, honed by months of training and aerial dominance. His own squadron is scattered, fighting for their individual lives. He pulls a hard, gut-wrenching turn, the G-forces blurring his vision. He feels a series of thudding impacts like a giant hammering on his fuselage. The stick goes limp in his hand. Smoke fills the cockpit. There's no dramatic explosion, no fireball. Just a sudden, shocking silence as the engine dies. He fights with the canopy, shoves it open, and throws himself out into the freezing, wind-blasted air. The world tumbles, a chaotic mix of blue and brown, until he pulls the ripcord. The jolt of the parachute opening is a brutal, beautiful thing. And as he floats down, the Mustang that crippled him flies a slow, almost respectful circle around his chute before banking away to rejoin its comrades. Hanging there, helpless, watching his plane become a funeral pyre on the German soil below, he doesn't feel anger. Just the quiet, dawning, and absolute recognition of defeat. The war in the air was over. The P-51 Mustang did not win the air war alone. That's a myth. It was part of a massive, complex system. The sheer industrial might of the United States, producing aircraft by the tens of thousands. The comprehensive pilot training programs. The advanced ground control radar directing a symphony of aerial battle. The strategic doctrine that prioritized destroying the Luftwaffe wherever it could be found. All these elements were crucial. But the Mustang became the ultimate symbol, the sharpest point of the spear that broke the back of German air power. The numbers tell the story. After the Mustang's widespread introduction as an escort in early 1944, bomber loss rates, which had been catastrophically high, began a steady, dramatic decline. The very men who faced it in combat gave it their grudging respect. Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring, in a moment of bitter honesty, reportedly said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up. The proof was in the sky." And so we're left with a beautiful irony. The North American P-51 Mustang, a fighter initially designed for the British, a plane once dismissed by the U.S. Army Air Forces as a low-altitude curiosity unfit for the European theater, became the weapon that guaranteed daylight air supremacy. It was the long-range escort that broke the Luftwaffe and, in doing so, escorted the final, closing chapters of the war in Europe. A rejected design that became a legend.